Have you ever wondered why some endgame competitive players use Minigun on Eclipse instead of Revoker? But there's actually a very simple reason why. You see, in endgame competitive, there are 4 build classes that you need to be aware of. 1 are the aggressive mechs, 2 are the defensive mechs, 3 are the passive mechs, and 4 are the support mechs. The aggressive mechs are pretty simple to understand and identify. The whole purpose of aggressive mechs is to push, and get kills. Builds like Revoker Surge, Revoker Nomad, and you could even potentially categorize Revoker Eclipse and Storm Mech Deathwalker in this category. The defensive mechs are also pretty explanatory too. All they do is hold back and defend, as opposed to the aggressors who go out and push to get kills. The defenders stay back and wait for mechs to push into them so that they can kill them. You'll typically see a defender mech at one point in a beacon, for example. Mechs like Blockhorn, Aegis, and Panther all serve defensive types of builds. You often see these guys paired with Minigun, Storm Mech, of course. Let's move on to the passive mechs. The passive mechs are exactly that. They're passive. They occasionally go out to get a kill or so, but they're not as aggressive as the aggressive class. These builds include things like a Storm Mech Lacewing and a Revoker Seeker. Many people think that a Seeker is actually an aggressive mech. In reality, it doesn't push anything. All it does is teleport, get a kill or two, and then teleport back. Usually at most it gets a kill before it teleports back. It's an assassin type of mech. And the Lacewing mainly just sits on top of buildings and gets kills from afar. It doesn't have to push for those kills. If it has Storm Mech, it can just sit back and kill people from buildings. And finally, the support mechs are pretty explanatory too. These are mechs such as Salvor, Solus, Hemlock, Outlaw. These mechs are often given support weapons. Now, what are support weapons? For example, the most popular one, obvious answer, is Podgun. Podgun is incredible for all of these mechs I just mentioned. Here, let's take Hemlock for example. Hemlock has an ability that curves around corners and has infinite range. Guess what? The Podguns have infinite range and they curve around corners, essentially making them the perfect pair. However, with support mechs, you're not going to be getting any kills. However, you're going to be helping your teammates get kills, whether that be by regenerating your team's health so that they can go out and keep eliminating the enemy, or whether that be marking or stasising someone so that they can be an easy kill for your allies. Now, if you did notice, I did mention build classes, not mech classes. The reason why I said that is because the way you combine your mechs and weapons definitely decides what category these builds go into. For example, let's take that Podgun Hemlock example from earlier, and let's swap out the Podguns for Storm Mechs, a much better killing weapon. By putting Storm Mechs on your Hemlock, you increase your killing power. However, now you have to expose yourself even more to get kills, which will more than likely lead you to be an easy target and being killed. Remember, in a competitive scene where it's a clan versus clan, it doesn't matter how well you do, it matters how well your team does. If your team wins, that's pretty much all that matters. It doesn't really matter if at the end screen you get 1 kill. You still contributed just as much as the top guy did. By putting aggressive weapons on support mechs, you essentially increase your killing power but decrease your team's killing power. Now let's take the previously mentioned Podguns and let's apply them to a build that usually has Storm Mechs. For example, how would a Podgun Deathwalker do? What a Deathwalker does is that it's usually an aggressive or a passive type. It goes out, it gets kills, comes back, waits for its ability to come back, goes out and gets kills. Typically you see this mech paired with Storm Mechs. However, how would it perform if you paired it with Podgun? Podgun is in no way an aggressive killing weapon, so pairing it with a mech that's supposed to be able to go out and get kills often is not a good idea. You're essentially decreasing your killing power and your team's killing power. The Deathwalker isn't contributing to your team at all in terms of support, and you're not going to be too passive with it either. However, the Podguns are going to be super passive. You would want something like Minigun, Revoker, or Storm Mech on Deathwalker, obviously Storm Mech being the better option. And Surge and Nomad are both aggressive type mechs. They have aggressive type abilities. They both have dashes that only work at close range. In the previous sniper meta, most of these mechs we would be seeing with railguns or EM rifles. For example, the railgun and EM rifle Surge was very popular back then. Now you might think, hold on a second, the sniper Surge was popular back then even though it had a close range ability. Well, the meta definitely influences the way builds work. Sniping was so potent back then that essentially people used Surge as a second Eclipse. Eclipse was very popular back then with snipers, and Surge was very valuable just as Eclipse for the stealth. You could stay back, apply stealth, and peek and shoot. However, Nomad didn't have the stealth that we're talking about here, so people paired it with Ember Gun. It had the resistance to be able to survive up close, and the Ember Guns essentially provided it a one-shot anytime. But now since snipers don't really work, Revokers have taken over, and now the 2 mechs abilities can really shine. Revoker is an obvious pairing for these 2 dash mechs. Now what about Eclipse? What kind of mech is Eclipse? Aggressive? Passive? Well, the true answer is that it can be both. You see, the weapon you put on a mech definitely changes what category it can go into, as I previously gave the example with the Hemlock and the Deathwalker. A Revoker Eclipse has its obvious benefits. For example, an Eclipse cannot be stunned by a Surge, and Surge is very close combat dominated, so essentially you could send out a Revoker Eclipse to counter a Revoker Surge. However, the same could be said for another Revoker Surge. You could send out a Revoker Surge to counter a Revoker Surge. And if we quickly take a look at Eclipse's ability, we find out that its ability is not as close range as Nomad and Surge's is. All Eclipse has is the face cloak that makes it untargetable and immune to every effect. It essentially works at any range, which could definitely categorize it as the best mech in the game right now. You could use any weapon on it and it'll shine. However, that's not what the video is about. The video is about Minigun versus Revoker. Which one should you use on Eclipse? Now, I'll start by establishing something. Every competitive player should have a Revoker Surge in their hangar, no questions asked. However, some may have a Nomad and some may not. If you have a Nomad, it would obviously have Revoker as well, meaning that you already have 2 aggressive mechs and there's no real need for the third one. However, a lot of endgame players have started taking Nomad out of their hangars. This build is just way too good. As a result, they scrap the Nomad and go with a Revoker Eclipse instead. Remember how in the previous meta I said that Surge doubled as a second Eclipse? Well, in this meta, Eclipse doubles as a second Surge. Does this mean I'm saying that Revoker Eclipse is the better option? Not necessarily. In every team there's 5 players and each of those 5 players have different roles. Some more aggressive than others, some more supportive than others. If you're an aggressive player, I would definitely recommend Revoker Eclipse. However, if you're not always throwing yourself out there in the battlefield, then there's no need for a Revoker Eclipse. Okay, but why does this automatically mean that Minigun is the second best option? You see, I believe there's something that many people don't think about, and that is map placement. Where are you going to set up your builds during the game? The aggressive players are the ones at the front pushing all the time. They're the only ones moving, while the passive and supportive players all stay in the back, whether that be a Lace Wing on top of a building, a Deathwalker and Seeker placing their abilities and going on to get a kill and coming back, or a Hemlock and Solus throwing out their abilities and their infinite range pot guns. As we can see, there's an empty hole here. However, what's the perfect build to put there? That's right, Minigun Eclipse. If your team's aggressive players clash with the enemy's aggressive players and your team loses, there is nothing stopping from the aggressive players to just keep pushing and get everyone in the back. However, if you have Minigun Eclipse there, you can do something about it. With Minigun's massive magazine, you can put constant pressure without being a risk of dying immediately. For example, Revokers can apply an infinite amount of pressure. However, if using Revokers, that means you're fighting other Revokers up close and you're going to die almost instantly. However, with Minigun, you have range. Revokers will not be able to reach you, and you can keep spraying down the enemy as they try to get close to you. You essentially serve as a second line of defense. If for some reason they make it through your Revoker surges, the Minigun Eclipse will easily gun them down. As opposed to Stormlight that does all of its damage at once and it has to reload, Minigun can keep firing continuously, which means you're not just stuck there with a Stormlight Lace Wing, awkwardly reloading as your teammates are getting killed. You can keep spraying with Minigun. And since you're an Eclipse, you're immune from all of the support mechs abilities. That being said, it depends on how your team plays. You may think that you do not need a transition mech between these two spaces. However, most teams can definitely benefit from it. I would at least recommend you give it a try. There's no better way to find out if a build is good than to try it yourself. Both Revoker and Minigun are solid options on Eclipse. With everything I've told you up to right now, take a look at your hangar. Categorize your builds into the 4 classes I mentioned. Do you have too much of one class? Maybe not enough of another. This is not just a guide to Eclipse, but to competitive builds in general. In the end, I want you to consider everything I've said and make the choice yourself. I hope this video has been helpful to you. Regardless, I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you out there on the battlefield.